For months, something felt off. The updates were getting shorter. The comments were filling up with questions that never got answered. And the couple who had built one of the most trusted names in yacht YouTube were suddenly very quiet about the one thing they'd promised their audience the most: their dream boat. Fans noticed, speculation spread, and then, in the summer of 2025, the rumors stopped being rumors. This is the full story of Victoria Chalaya and Rico Stoll, two people who came from completely different worlds, somehow ended up on the same yacht, built something extraordinary together, and then watched a years-long dream get dragged into a federal courtroom. Victoria Chalaya didn't grow up dreaming about yachts. She grew up in St. Petersburg, Russia, with one very specific ambition. She wanted to make films. At 16 years old, she packed up her life and moved to Los Angeles to attend UCLA Film School. That alone is remarkable. Most kids that age are figuring out how to drive. Victoria was crossing the world, chasing a career in one of the most competitive industries on the planet. Hollywood didn't hand her anything easily. She started acting to pay the bills. Movies, TV shows, commercials, and eventually earned her place in the Screen Actors Guild after more than 2 decades of working in the business. She also launched Fashion Minga, a fashion show platform that grew to become one of the most prominent events at LA Fashion Week. By any measure, Victoria had already built a successful life before a single camera rolled on a boat. Rico's path was just as unlikely, just from the opposite direction. Born and raised in Germany, he spent 4 years in the military before transitioning into work as a paramedic. Most people would call that a solid, stable foundation for a career. Rico called it a detour. His real passion was music, specifically house music. And at 27 years old, having just been accepted into the fire department, he made a decision that surprised everyone around him. He walked away from it, packed up, moved to Los Angeles to pursue DJing full-time. That kind of leap either works or it destroys you. For Rico, it worked. He built a career performing alongside some of the biggest names in electronic music, became a resident DJ for Insomniac Events, the company behind some of the largest festivals in North America, and eventually got to play the main stage at EDC Orlando in front of over 100,000 people. Not bad for a German paramedic who gambled everything on a dream. The two of them crossed paths on the set of the TV show Castle, where Rico had been hired as a DJ. They hit it off immediately. Two people who had both left stable lives behind to chase something bigger. It makes sense they'd recognize each other. When Victoria and Rico got together, they discovered they shared something neither had planned for: a genuine obsession with being on the water. Rico had the idea first. A friend of his had lived on a boat in Marina del Rey, and it sounded like the kind of life worth trying. Victoria was interested, but practical. She suggested they charter first and figure out what they actually liked before committing to anything. What started as a weekend hobby turned into an all-consuming passion. They chartered almost every weekend. They got certified on monohulls, then catamarans. Victoria became a certified marine naturalist and volunteered at a gray whale migration census. They both obtained U.S. Coast Guard captain's licenses. Eventually, they stopped renting and bought their own boat, a Meridian 408 motor yacht, and moved aboard full-time. They would live on that boat for 8 years. The YouTube channel came out of that life. Victoria had been looking for a creative outlet, and she could see a genuine gap in the market. Nobody was doing serious, credible yacht tours aimed at real enthusiasts, content that didn't feel like a glorified sales pitch. So Nautistyles launched with one rule baked in from day one. They would never accept payment for yacht tours. No pay for play, no working for hire. They'd choose what they covered, and they'd cover it honestly. That integrity became their brand identity. The audience noticed. The channel grew steadily and then rapidly, eventually crossing 500,000 subscribers with over 200 million views across their platforms combined. They were pulling in millions of views per month, had expanded into a marine dealership called RJ Nautical, and had become genuine authorities in the yachting industry. Not just content creators, but licensed captains and business owners who happen to make great videos. But quietly, behind the scenes, they had been working towards something far bigger than a YouTube channel. In 2022, Victoria and Rico made the kind of announcement that stops a community in its tracks. After years of touring some of the most impressive vessels on the planet, after living on a boat for the better part of a decade, they were going to build their own, not buy, build, from scratch. The boat they chose was a Bering 75, a semi-custom steel hull explorer yacht from US-based Bering Yachts, with shipyard operations in Bulgaria and Turkey. The model had an LOA of over 23 meters, displaced 160 metric tons, and offered a range of more than 4,000 nautical miles. It was a serious, capable, long-range vessel designed for people who actually intended to go places the average yacht couldn't reach. The two of them flew to the shipyard in Antalya, Turkey, had extensive discussions with the bearing team, and signed the contract. When the keel was laid, they were there, literally welding a coin into the hull, a tradition that marks the beginning of a ship's life. They named the yacht Adamus. They also launched a brand new YouTube channel called Nautistyles, specifically to document the build process. In the first 24 hours after uploading the announcement video, it generated over 100,000 views. Their audience wasn't just interested, they were invested. This wasn't just a YouTube couple buying a boat. This was a community rallying around two people who had earned their trust. The build was later redesignated a Bearing 82, after Bearing Yachts recalculated the vessel's gross tonnage and renamed the model to more accurately reflect what was actually being built. Victoria and Rico documented that development openly too, treating their audience as partners in the journey rather than passive viewers. At that point, everything still felt like it was going according to plan. Then the updates started thinning out. It's subtle at first, easy to dismiss as the natural ebb and flow of a long-term build project. Boats take time. Custom Steel Explorer yachts don't roll off a production line in 6 months. The Nautistyles audience understood that, and for a while, patience held. But something in the tone was shifting. The transparency that had defined both channels from the beginning started feeling guarded. Questions in the comments about build progress were going unanswered or getting vague responses. Fans who had followed the entire journey from that first announcement video began piecing things together in the threads. Delays, timeline changes, the way updates seemed to get shorter and less specific even as months turned into years. Speculation is a natural product of an audience that cares. When the people you've followed for years suddenly go quiet about the one thing they've been building toward, you notice. The yachting community is tight-knit and opinionated, and it wasn't long before people were asking openly, in comments, in forums, in other yachting channels, whether something had gone seriously wrong with the Adamus build. Victoria and Rico maintained their presence. They kept posting on Nautistyles, kept doing yacht tours, kept engaging with their community. But the Nautistyles content, the whole channel dedicated to documenting the dream, told its own story through what wasn't being shown. And then the summer of 2025 arrived, and everything came out. On July 30th, 2025, a federal complaint was filed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina. The case number was 525 CV00463. The plaintiff was listed as Angelus LLC, the corporate entity through which Victoria and Rico operate. The defendants included Bearing Yachts LLC and a web of connected entities and individuals reaching across multiple countries. The complaint alleged fraud. It alleged that funds had been siphoned rather than applied to the construction of the vessel they had paid for. The picture that emerged from the filing was of a build that had stalled, not because of the natural complexity of constructing a large steel explorer yacht, but because of alleged deliberate misappropriation of the money they had invested into making that boat a reality. Multiple bearing-related companies were named in the suit, including entities connected to the Turkey-based shipyard operations. Several individuals were identified as defendants as well. The scope of the legal action made clear this wasn't a simple contract dispute over delivery timelines. The allegations went to the heart of whether the people they had trusted with one of the most significant financial commitments of their lives had actually been building their boat at all. The yachting media picked it up fast. Multiple channels dedicated entire episodes to breaking down the court documents. Marine industry publications covered it. What had been whispered about in comment sections was now documented in a federal filing, publicly accessible to anyone willing to look it up. For Victoria and Rico, this was the confirmation of something that no one wants to discover, that the dream they had shared with hundreds of thousands of people had potentially been exploited by the very builder they had trusted to make it real. One of the more striking things about how this situation unfolded was the response from the Nautistyles and Nautistyles community. There was no wave of mockery, no pile-on. The audience that had invested emotionally in this build, the people who had watched Victoria weld that coin into the hull and felt something genuine about it, largely responded with support. That kind of loyalty doesn't happen by accident. It's the product of years of operating with the kind of integrity Victoria and Rico had baked into their brand from day one. They had never taken money for yacht tours. They had been transparent about the financial pressure the build put on them. They had treated their audience like adults, sharing the complicated parts of the process rather than packaging everything into a highlight reel. When the lawsuit went public, people understood that this was a couple who had been honest with them throughout. The information gap wasn't deception. It was the appropriate caution of people navigating active legal proceedings. And for a community that had been asking questions for months, having those questions finally answered, even in the worst possible way, provided its own difficult kind of closure. Even as the federal case worked its way through the courts, reports emerged that Victoria and Rico were not sitting still. According to coverage from the yachting press, the couple had moved forward with plans for a new bespoke 77-foot build with a different builder. The dream of owning and operating a custom charter yacht in the Bahamas and the Caribbean, the vision that had driven the Adamus project from the beginning, had not been abandoned. It had been redirected. That says something about who these two people are. Victoria left Russia at 16 with a film school dream. Rico walked away from a secure career at 27 to DJ in a city where he knew nobody. Neither of them has ever been someone who absorbs a setback and quietly gives up. The personality types that produce those kinds of choices are the same ones that look at a federal lawsuit and start planning the next build. The Nautistyles channel continues to operate, posting yacht tours with the same independence that defined it from the beginning. Victoria remains active in the broader yachting industry. Working in yacht sales at Barring Yachts Americas is no longer part of the picture given events, but her connections and credibility in the marine space run far deeper than any single business relationship. The Adamus chapter is not closed. Legal proceedings take time, and whatever outcome the court reaches will add another chapter to a story that has already surprised everyone who followed it. But what Victoria and Rico have demonstrated through the whole arc of it is something genuinely rare, the kind of resilience that doesn't require a clean ending to keep moving. There's a version of this story that treats it as a cautionary tale about YouTube couples getting in over their heads. That version misses the point entirely. Victoria Chalaya spent 2 decades building a career in one of the world's most brutal industries. Rico Rockstole built a successful music career from scratch in a foreign country with no safety net. Together they created a media brand that earned the trust of an audience numbering in the hundreds of thousands, without ever compromising the editorial independence they promised from day one. They obtained professional maritime credentials. They built real businesses. They documented a complex custom yacht build in a way that genuinely educated their viewers. What this story reveals is something far more uncomfortable than creator naivety. It reveals the risks hiding inside an industry where large sums of money cross international borders, where shipyards operate across multiple jurisdictions, and where even the most informed and experienced buyers can find themselves standing at the wrong end of a fraud allegation, with a half-built hull and a federal filing as their only recourse. Victoria and Rico didn't stumble into the yachting world as wide-eyed influencers looking for content. They arrived as licensed captains with years of live-aboard experience and a community that believed in them, and they still ended up here. That's the part of this story that lingers long after the headlines fade. The rumors have been confirmed. The lawsuit is real. But what comes next? For the courts, for the new build, and for two people who have never once taken the easy path, is still being written. The story of Victoria and Rico is proof that no amount of preparation fully shields you from betrayal. These weren't naive dreamers who stumbled blindly into a bad deal. They were licensed captains, industry veterans, and two of the most respected voices in yacht YouTube, and it still happened to them. But here's what stands out more than the lawsuit, more than the headlines, and more than the drama that the yachting community couldn't stop talking about. They didn't disappear. They didn't go quiet and hope people forgot. They kept showing up, kept creating, and kept planning the next chapter, because that's exactly what they've always done. Victoria crossed the world at 16 with nothing but a dream. Rico walked away from a guaranteed career to chase music in a city that didn't know his name. Two people built from that kind of steel don't get finished off by a courtroom filing. The rumors were real. The pain behind them was real. But so is everything they built before any of this happened, and everything they're building now. Whatever comes next for Adamus, for the new vessel, and for Nautistyles, one thing is already certain. Victoria and Rico are still sailing.